Thank you, and welcome back from lunch. This session is on, there'll be a paper presented on using log files to identify sequential patterns in PIAAC problem-solving environments by US adults' employment status. And the paper is by Dandan, Liao, Britt, he, and Hong Yao.
Thank you, Eugene. I figured out that he cannot pronounce my Chinese name correctly. So my Chinese name is Qiwei, so Qiwei Britt is my English name. So it's our honor to be here today and to give some presentation about our research project. It is about using log files to identify sequential patterns in PIAAC problem-solving items by US adults employees status. Actually, the log files is not that strange to everybody now. As just Irvin already mentioned in the PIAAC Cycle 2, there will be more access to the log files and the process data. So today I want to just shed some light about what kind of process data can tell us and what kind of research study we can use them. This project actually is a joint effort with Dr. Dandan Liao and also Professor Hong Yao from University of Maryland. So some introduction. As one of the innovation pioneers in international large-scale assessments, PIAAC is the first international household survey of elder skills that includes measurements of ICT literacy skills, digital reading, and PISDRE. We'll call them as problem-solving in technology-rich environments, besides our traditional core assessment in numeracy and literacy. So as this morning from the numeracy section, we have already seen this kind of sample item. You can see actually they will following this kind of instruction, and the test takers need to click on what kind of things. And this is one sample item in the literacy. And this is also, you can put an open-ended question this kind of way. So it's a traditional way. So this is a PISDRE. So in this kind of environment, actually test takers can have interaction with the computers because they can use searching or sorting this kind of function from the spreadsheet and also use copy or paste, this kind of thing. So actually in the log files, we record all their actions and their timed things in the log files. So we extract them out as a process data, and then we can do some analysis. So that means computers as a delivery platform, so we can capture not only the response data, so that means test taker can able to solve the task, but also the process data from log files. That means how they solve the problems, what's the solution there, and how much time their efforts take. So this kind of new data source will especially valuable in PISDRE, which can provide the possibility in deeper understanding and tracking the problem-solving sequence, and also help us in detecting the reasons of success or failure in a digital task. Before we really get into our study, so let's see some results from the PIAAC study round 1. And this one actually we can see it is a PISDRE average scores and achievement level percentages. You can see actually from the international averages 278, but the United States is located even below that one. So that means we are not doing that well in the PIAAC, especially in the PISDRE domain, compared with the other international peers. So this result is a little bit disappointing, especially when we evaluate against a significant financial investments. Okay. And then so because we put a lot of money into the educational things, He doesn't love my presentation in this way. And so we provide for our learners and relatively easy access to this kind of digital technology in this country. So we want to understand what is wrong and which group actually in PISDRE is lagged behind, and whether we can use our log file data to help to find this kind of way. So our current study actually, we want to aim at identifying manageable factors associated with problem-solving skills. And then we want to take advantage of new methods for analyzing process data in log files to identify the key factors associated with PISDRE. And then finally, we want to compare the patterns in problem solving derived from a closer examination of the different strategies used by groups that vary in employment-related background profiles. For example, from job categories, learning at school, learning at work, and salary, and etc. So we will have three research questions. The first one is we want to understand what features can be extracted from process data by different employment status. It's a kind of a top-down approach because we extract the sequential features by subgroups with different employment status. And the second research question, we want to do the cluster analysis to use a clustering test takers based on features extracted from process data. What do they, in each cluster, have in common from their employment-related variables? So that will be a bottom-up. And the last question, we will focus on what are the differences between test takers whose response behaviors are consistent or not. I will give the floor to my colleague Dandan Liao, and she will continue to give the detail about the data and the methodology as part.
Okay. Thank you, Qiwei, and thank you, Eugene, for pronouncing my name correctly. So my name is Dandan Liao. I am a psychometrician at the American Institutes for Research. So I drove through this key bridge every day, but this is the first time I've seen the view. It's pretty. The data we use in this study include two data sets, including the public use data file and the log files. So we focus on two representative items in this study. U02 is a meeting room assignment problem. So it asks you to read through a list of emails and find out which ones are about meeting room requests. And then you have to switch to another environment to fill in the details of the meeting room requests. Compared to U02, U19A is a relatively easier item, so it just asks you to find out the ID of a specific person given a list of member information. So this is a screenshot of the actual process data. You can see that it's ordered in a chronologically for each person. So this is it gives you the kind of actions that's performed at each time point, and then it also tells you the details of the actions performed. So for research question 1, we explore the sequential features of different employment statuses. We first selected 26 variables from the background questionnaire, and then we use them as predictors in our regression analysis. The outcome variables include literacy, numeracy, PSTRE scores, as well as the correctness and response time of U02. So by doing that, we're able to compare which variables are important for each of the outcome variables. So then, excuse me. So then we focus specifically on the correctness of U02, and then we divide the test takers into subgroups based on these significant variables. So now that we have these groups with significant different probabilities of getting U02 correct, we want to know what kind of actions are associated with these very different probabilities. So the first thing we notice in the results is that well-educated young test takers with more work experience and higher work-related skill use tend to have higher PSTRE scores and higher chance of getting U02 correct, which is as we expected. The other thing is that there is one unique significant variable for PSTRE, the reading skill used at work. So this is also significant for U02 correctness. And then when we look at the actions used and in the higher versus lower reading skill group, we notice that those people in the higher reading skill use group, they tend to use actions demonstrating clear sub-goals, like mail viewed. So that is viewing the mail and trying to understand what is requested in the email. And then combo box is like filling out, such as the start time, end time, and the location of the meeting room request. And change reservation is that they probably notice something wrong with an existing reservation, and then they try to correct it. On the other hand, the actions used in the lower reading skill group are kind of only 1 minute. Okay, so
Go ahead, take
okay.
your time. Take your time.
Okay, so we have these actions are very different from the actions used in a higher reading skill group. They're actually more aimless, such as moving the mails around and viewing the folder. These are not necessary steps for solving the item. And also, they are unable to submit a reservation successfully. So for research question 2, we use a bottom-up approach. So assuming that the only thing you know about the test takers are these single actions, which we call unigrams, number of actions, and response time, what does the latent clustering structure look like for these test takers? So here you see we have 3 clusters. The majority of the test takers are in cluster 1 with very low frequency of actions, very low number of actions, and low response time. And then there's a moderate size group with moderate number of actions and response time. And then there's a small group of people with extremely high action frequencies and response time. So then we're wondering what is the relationship between these cluster membership and PSTRE scores. So if you look at the plot on the left, you can see that the PSTRE scores for the cluster 1 are substantially lower than the other 2 clusters. That seemed to indicate that if you spend only a few actions or a few very short response time on the item, that might be an indication of your low PSTRE skill. And then, however, if you spend excessive amount of actions and response time on the item, it does not necessarily associate with much higher PSTRE scores. What is more interesting is that when we break down the clusters further by the U02 score, 0 correct or incorrect. So if you answer correctly to the items, it actually doesn't matter if you which action patterns you use, whether you spend much time or short time on the items, it doesn't matter much. But if you answer incorrectly to the item, you can see that there seem to be these 3 clusters seem to have very different PSTRE skills. So then, for the occupational types, this is one of the employment-related variables we looked at. So the 3 clusters are also very different in terms of occupation types. So you can see that cluster 1, compared to the other 2 clusters, cluster 1 has the lowest percentage on the skilled occupations, but higher percentages on the semi-skilled or elementary occupations. For cluster 2, it has the highest percentage on the skilled occupations and semi-skilled white-collar occupations. For cluster 3, even though it doesn't have the, to our surprise, it doesn't have the highest skilled occupations, but it has a pretty decent proportion of semi-skilled blue-collar occupations. So now the last research question is about consistency. So now that we know the performance of these test takers on one item, we're wondering, those test takers, are they in the same mode across multiple items? Do they use the same amount of time to solve different items? Here in this study, we use the most dominant features that was found in the previous in research question 2, that is the number of actions and response time. We use these 2 features to group the test takers into 4 quadrants. And then based on the 4 quadrants, we can group them into 5 consistency groups. Now, due to the concern of the sample size, we only look at consistency groups 1, 3, and 5 in this analysis. So 1 is if you spend a lot of actions and very long response time on it, which we consider a high effort. And then the group 3 consists of test takers with a few actions and also short response time. That is the low effort group. And then the group 5 consists of all the test takers who switch quadrants between the 2 items. So if we look at the occupation type, the same variable as we looked at in the research question 2, you can see that, I forgot to say something. So the group 1 actually has the highest overall PSCRE skill, which means that the people who spend a lot of effort on these items are associated with much higher PSCRE scores. And also, the group 3 also it has, on the other hand, has really low PSCRE scores. And group 5, the inconsistency group, seemed to be like a mix of two groups, mix of different profiles. And then if we look at the occupation types, you can see if you just ignore the gray bars for a second and just look at the black and white ones, you can see that the black bars is higher than the white bars on the skilled occupations, but on the other profiles, on the other occupation types, the black bar is lower. And then the gray bars seem to be the same, like a mix of the two profiles. So to summarize, there are a few key takeaways in our study. The first one is that we found some profiles that have higher chance to succeed in solving digital tasks. So these are the young and well-educated test takers with more work experience and higher work-related skills. And also, the higher performing group is more likely to use actions with clear sub-goals, but on the other hand, the lower performing group are more aimless. So, and then to our surprise, test takers with the most effort have even though they have the highest proficiency level, they do not necessarily possess the highest income, work-related skill use, or education level. Here we do not, due to the time constraint, we do not have we do not present all the results here, but this is a pretty interesting finding from the study. And last one, we think that we need to pay special attention to those subgroups with really low effort on the items, especially consistent low effort. They tend to be elder test takers who possess non-skilled occupations with lower income, lower work-related skills, or lower education. So, I think there is a very rich information in the process data compared to the research that has been done. So this is only like one of the preliminary steps to look into this area. And then it occurred to me when I was listening to the morning sessions that maybe we could use process data to better measure like collaboration or communication or soft skills and that kind of stuff that could be taken into account. And this study, we hope this study would contribute to this literature and then stimulate more interest in this area. So the implication of this study, in addition to the methodology, we also provide insights about the strategies that differentiate high and low PSCRE proficiency, and also how it relates to adults' employment statuses. And this is especially important for policymakers because this would help policymakers to find targeted intervention for a special population. And then future study could develop approach to generalize this problem-solving patterns to multiple items so that we could obtain more reliable results. And this is one of the challenges in analyzing process data because the actions themselves are different across multiple items. So it's hard to generalize your findings to multiple items. One of the solutions we found, one of the way we found to solve this question is to use number of actions and response time in this study, but there is definitely other measures that could be developed to obtain more reliable results. So here's our email address if you want to contact us. So thank you very much for your attention.
And now for the discussion, Marco Paccagnella from the OECD.
Good afternoon, everyone. And thanks for the invitation to discuss this very interesting paper. I will try to provide, well, I will start with a brief summary. So the paper performs 3 different empirical exercises. The first aims to identify consistent action sequences in different subgroups of the population. The second aims to cluster respondents on the basis of the action sequences. This is the bottom-up. And the last one aims to check the consistency of action sequences across 2 different items. 3 empirical exercises, 3 very different empirical exercises, maybe 3 papers, not just 1 paper. Indeed, it was very clear from the presentation that there's a lot of material, and so I do encourage you to go through the paper and read it. So these exercises provide a useful characterization in terms of the background characteristics of groups of respondents that undertake similar strategies. So in terms of the results, from the first exercise, we see that higher performing groups are more likely to use purposeful actions, and lower performing groups are more likely to use redundant or useless actions. I found very interesting the fact that young adults have a very peculiar behavior. It did not emerge a lot in the presentation, but I think it's a very interesting point. For the second exercise, the analysis find 3 clusters that are more or less correlated with effort and rate of success in the item. And as far as the third exercise is concerned, the result is that about 2/3 of the sample show inconsistent behavior across the two items. And this group, of course, it's a very large group and it's a very diverse group. So I will now provide just a few comments to the authors since I went through the paper. So in terms of the first empirical exercise, well, the first very minor comment is about the wording. So you talk about employment status, but in fact you put a lot of background characteristics like age, education. So I mean, I would not call them employment status. Then I think that, this first part can be greatly simplified. So you adopt this like of kitchen sink approach where you run a regression of multiple outcomes on a large set of variables, and then you select the variables that turn out to be statistically significant. So, well, the first comment is, why is the statistical significance of the regressor and not like the predictive power of the regressor? The categories are not mutually exclusive, so you have you look at the groups with low education, you look at the groups with higher that are unemployed, but of course there's a large overlap. So people are the same people are in different categories. I'm not sure that all these subgroups are policy relevant. For instance, because some characteristics are not very easy to observe, like the use of the skills at work. In the end, I suggest first, what I would have intuitively done, the first thing I would have done is to simply group respondents according to PSTRE proficiency itself or to rate of success in the item. The part that I like the most of the first section is that you have a very good discussion of the link between the actions and the underlying cognitive processes. And if you could be able to do more of that, to expand a little bit and work in that direction, I think it would be very, very useful, because the important thing with these log files is to make sense of the actions that you see in relation with the tasks that the respondents have to solve. The second section, this is the part of the paper that I like the most. I think the exercise is very intuitive, it's very clear. Just a note of caution how you interpret the presence of skilled respondents in each cluster. So you say, well, given that in each cluster we have people that solve the item successfully and they have more or less the same PSTRE proficiency. So there's a sentence in the paper, well, the actual strategy doesn't really matter for people that get the item right. I would be a bit more careful here. So the clustering algorithm is a bit blind. So you only use unigrams, and you don't take really into account the order of the action. So I wonder whether the algorithm misclassify some people, put some people in the first group They perform fewer actions. They spend less time, but maybe they perform the actions in the right order. So they're able to get the item right, using fewer actions in a short period of time. So I would say that they're probably like misclassified in the. Finally, the last part clearly points. It's a very good illustration that these log files are really item specific, and it's very difficult to generalize across different items. So you have a bit of this trade-off. When you look at PSTRE items, you have a lot of actions that you can link to cognitive strategies. On the other hand, the PSTRE items are a bit all different from each other, so it's very hard to draw general conclusions. So the fourth point, are the items really comparable? I think the first thing that you should do is to show that the actions, so the time spent and the number of actions, are similarly related to outcomes or to background characteristics across the two items. Actually, there is some evidence that this is not the case, because the relationship between number of actions and time on task is different in the two items. And then another thing that I would do first is to look at the characteristics of the same groups in the two items, while you jump immediately to classify, to form the 5 different groups according to whether the behavior is consistent or not. Why 4 consistency groups and just 1 inconsistent group? So I'm afraid I have the feeling that the results that you get in this section are mostly driven by how you classify the respondents in the 5 groups. So for the consistency group, you have 4 different groups. For the inconsistent behavior, you put everybody in the same inconsistent group. So of course you have a very diverse set of people. I mean, if you put cluster 1 and cluster 3 in the same group, you would have said the same thing with group 5, which is the inconsistent group. And then the number of actions and time, they are of course you use them because they are the indicators that have the same meaning across different items, but of course they're not the most interesting one to look at. Again, this trade-off. So I wonder, what if you exclude those indicators from the first and the second exercise, and how the results change? Thanks a lot.
Thank you.